Welcome to Rise, Healer, Rise, the podcast where your transformative journey as a healer takes flight. We're here to guide you on a sacred path of embracing your essence and transforming your sensitivity into strength. Are you a healer, an empath, a creative soul, or a leader who has a deep desire to share your gifts and create an abundant life that honors the beauty of our earth? In a world that's calling out for healing, your unique gifts are more needed than ever. But how do healers, creative souls, and leaders of our new earth maintain their spiritual connection while navigating the material realm? The answer lies within you, and I believe in your power to rise up and navigate the challenges that lie ahead. The key to unlocking your full potential lies in sharing your healing tools, and just by doing this, you invoke divine right protection. Inside this podcast, we explore nature-based methods to clear trauma, cultivate sacred essence, and share your gifts to create a significant impact and thrive as a modern-day healer. Join me, Sarah Estelle, your host, flower essence expert, high priestess and business guide, for content that soothes your soul and sparks inspiration. At full moon, we welcome a special guest to impart their wisdom. Together, we rise, heal and transform. So embrace your essence. Honor the abundance of Gaia. You are source. You are limitless. The world awaits your light. Rise, healer, rise. Welcome to Rise, Healer, Rise. I'm your host, Sarah Estelle Turner, and today we're revisiting a special episode from 2014, originally part of my Nature Connection series. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Stefan Ball, a director of the Bach Centre and a respected author in the world of flower essences. If you're a lover of the Bach essences, which I am, this conversation will resonate deeply with you. Stefan shares invaluable insights on how to select the right essences for yourself, reveals which Bach essences are most popular around the world, and offers his recommendations for essences that can support us in navigating the fast pace of today's world. Join us as we explore the enduring legacy of Dr. Bach and how his work continues to bring healing to countless lives.
Hello, Sarah. Nice to be here.
Yeah, so delighted to have you here because the Bach Remedies, as so often happens, is actually the place where I began my own journey.
Sure. I think it's the same for most people. A lot of people who come to essences in general start with the remedies, yeah.
Yeah, so they completely changed the direction of my life. And they are still a large part of my practice today, a very large part. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I actually said that if I had, the dreaded question, what range would you take to a desert island? I actually said, I think I'd take the Bach range with me.
Oh, it's nice to know.
Yeah. So they're very dear to my own heart. So it's really lovely to talk to you. So I think it would be really useful for especially somebody like you who's so connected with Dr. Bach and in taking his legacy forward, but to share with us about Dr. Bach and how this range how it came about.
Okay, well, Dr. Bach started off as an orthodox doctor. He was a bacteriologist, a pathologist, and he was engaged in research into vaccine therapy, and in particular, he was looking at chronic diseases. And he isolated some bacteria, which he used to prepare 7 different vaccines. And when he was offered a chance to go and work at the Royal London Homeopathic Hospital, he became interested in homeopathy, and that's what kind of changed the direction of his life. And he started off preparing the bacteria using homeopathic methods, but then he began looking for a natural replacement for those, and that's what began looking at plants. And what he did between about 1928 and 1935, he discovered 38 remedies, all of which were attached to particular emotional states and particular personality types and so on. And that is what we now know as the Bach flower remedies. So it's kind of a move from orthodox medicine via homeopathy into something completely new that was, his own idea.
Mm. Mm. And how did that then develop into what is now? What were the next steps?
Well, the next steps really were when he left London in 1930. I mean, he moved away from homeopathy at that point because he came up with a new preparation method, which was we now know as the sun method, which is the method that most essence producers now use to make remedies. And that kind of was the step away from homeopathy. And at the same time, he stepped away from treating physical problems directly. So he began more and more to focus on emotions. By the time he came to the place I am now, which is the Bach Centre, that was in 1934, he was only working on emotions, only working with the flower remedies. That was how he saw the future of medicine. He thought that would be the way medicine would go in the future.
And I think he was right, don't you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think energy medicine in general is now more and more understood to be useful, and more people are using it. The Bach remedies, in many ways, were one of the key, starting points for that whole idea.
Absolutely, yes, it is. Many people say, don't they, it's the medicine of the future.
Yeah.
And so how wonderful to have this connection back. So where you work right now, the Bach Centre is actually in the place that Dr. Bach bought to.
Yeah, I mean, he actually moved into this house. I mean, we're a very unpretentious Victorian 2 up, 2 down cottage, basically. And he came here in 1934. He'd been travelling around for 4 years with his assistant, a lady called Nora Weeks. And they've been going around looking for plants, finding plants. And at that point, they were kind of looking for a place where they could set up a centre, a place where people could come and get help and advice about the remedies. So they moved into this cottage, and Dr. Bach lived here the last 2 years of his life, completed his research here. And when he died, he left all that work in the hands of his friends and colleagues. He had 3 people, basically, who were helping him at that point. Nora Weeks, who I mentioned, who left London with him. There was a guy called Victor Bullen, who they met in Cromer in Norfolk. And there was a lady called Mary Tabor, who was a local lady who lived around the corner in a house called Wellsprings. And the 3 of them promised, basically, to continue the work after Dr. Bach died. And that's what we've always done here, because when he died, Dr. Bach had a very clear idea about how he wanted the system to continue. He believed it was, he believed one of the most important things about it was that it was very simple, so that anyone could use it to help themselves. So he wanted it kept simple. He wanted the 38 remedies to always be a complete system. And he wanted the idea of self-help, remedies being chosen purely for the individual to be kept. And he wanted those remedies to be made available around the world. So those were the things that Mary, Victor, and Nora promised Dr. Bach when he died, and that's kind of how we began here. That was the beginning of what became the Bach Centre.
That's lovely, isn't it, to know that this promise has been carried right through?
Well, yeah, and I think it's the most important thing we do here. We always ask ourselves, is whatever we're thinking of doing in line with what Dr. Bach wanted? And that's always the main question we ask.
Yeah. That's I can really tell that as well by what you're talking about, the energy of it. So let's talk about the 38 remedies, which were the 38 remedies that Dr. Bach himself identified and worked with himself. And the fact that many of the people listening right now may not have used essences before and may be very interested in a way of helping themselves. So if you, as you are right now in front of people who would like maybe to know the next step as to how they can use them, what would your advice be?
Well, I think the simple thing is to start with where you are right now. So one of the keys to using Dr. Bach's remedies is to focus on today. He always believed that today is the important thing. It's not what happened last week or last year or in your childhood. It's today. It's how you feel today. So the simple way to start using them is really to go and look at a list of the remedies. You'll find loads of lists online which will give the basic indication for each remedy. And just look down the list and see which ones you feel most resonate with how you feel today. And you can mix up to 6 or 7 together. Sometimes you'll only take one. And you come up with a mix which best matches where you are now. And that's how you start the process. And we talk about peeling the onion a lot on our courses. And what that means is that you remain superficial when you're using the batch remedies. You're always working on the outside, what you can see, and you allow the remedies to do the work. So you don't need a kind of a very intrusive psychotherapeutic approach where you're trying to uncover what's at the heart. You let the remedies do the work. This really is a lazy man's therapy because you can allow the remedies to do the hard stuff, unpeel the layers as you go, and you might find something inside that you weren't aware of when you started. And that's why using the system becomes a kind of form of self-understanding, self-exploration. And the actually process of taking the remedies is really very, very easy. Say you've identified you need 3 remedies. You can buy those remedies in a shop. They're what is called a stock remedy. It's not very expensive, each bottle, maybe £5 or £6, and that will last you literally years because all you need to do is take 2 drops at a time, either into a mixing bottle, which is a 30 ml bottle with a dropper mixed, fitted into the cap. You put 2 drops of each remedy into that, top it up with mineral water. You can add a teaspoon of brandy or other alcohol to help it keep fresh if you want. And then you just take that 4 drops at a time, at least 4 times a day. So it's a very simple approach. Anyone can do it.
And it's very safe, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of the remedies. And it's one of the differences between what we do and some other therapies. With some therapies, you're using substances that can actually do harm. So it's important that you have the right remedy selected in some systems because you might things worse. The very worst that can happen with the batch system is that you don't achieve anything. So if you pick all the wrong remedies, or say you take 20 or 30 remedies, which is way too many, what will happen is nothing because you won't actually feel an effect, but you won't feel worse.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? And that is so empowering to know how safe it is. So what would you suggest for pregnancy or people who are very poorly?
We would start with asking the person how they felt. So whatever the situation was, whether it's someone who is pregnant or someone who is starting school for the first time, maybe a child, or whether it's someone who's dying, whatever the situation, you always start with how the person feels about it. And that's what makes this extremely personal. So if you take pregnancy as an example, let's say the moment when you find out that you're pregnant. Now, for some people, this might be a moment of great excitement, and they find that they can't stop planning about the future, and their mind is always away from the present, and they're not really enjoying now because they're so busy in the future. Now, that might be a remedy like clematis, for example, or it might be a remedy like vervain, depending on the person. Then you might have someone else who takes that news as a shock, maybe an unwelcome shock, and that person might feel actually traumatized by that news, and then we'd be looking at a remedy like Star of Bethlehem. So it's purely about how the individual person responds. It's always about the emotion. And one of the other things we often say on courses, we talk about moving from the story to the feeling to the remedy. In other words, you start off with a story that someone tells. That's, I found out I'm pregnant. Then you get to the feeling. How do you feel about that? And it's only then that you move to the remedy. Okay, the remedy for that feeling is this.
Yeah, it's very simple, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very straightforward. Simple. Yeah.
And very grounding, because so often nowadays we don't take time to actually work out how we feel.
No, I think that's right, and I think one of the important things about the remedies is that they build into your life a space where you are actually focusing on how you feel about things. And so many of us, I mean, we always we say we're human beings, but we're often human doings. We're more preoccupied with our task lists and our to-do lists and all the things we have to do, bang, bang, bang. But we're not actually stopping to be. And one of the things the remedies give us, if we engage with them, is that we have a moment in our lives every day when we're actually stopping everything and we're just saying, how do I feel now? And that's probably one of the most important benefits you get from using the system.
Be a great thing to do, wouldn't it? Just at the beginning of each day and maybe at the end of each day.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because when we're talking about taking the remedies, we often say that, you take at least 4 times a day, especially first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And I think that keys into what you've just said, is because it gives you that moment when you're taking the remedy. You have a moment when you reflect on why you're taking those remedies and how you feel. And that's part of becoming more aware.
Yeah. Brilliant. And I love that the simplicity is being carried through, which was Dr. Batch's wish. Let's talk a little bit about essences in today's world. And I have a question which I'm not quite sure how easy it is to answer, but what's the most popular essence that's sold? Is there one that sells way above all the others?
I'm not actually. I haven't actually got recent figures, because you probably know we sold our own remedy making business quite a long time ago, so we're not actually directly involved in that. We don't see sales figures, but I do remember seeing a list a couple of years ago, and I believe at that time in the UK the top seller was white chestnut, which is a remedy for recurring circular worrying thoughts, the kind of thing that won't leave you alone, so you can't focus on now. But the interesting thing I found in that list was that the most popular remedies were different in different countries. For example, in Argentina, the top seller was actually crabapple, which is a remedy for when you feel unclean, but it's also a remedy for when you're very focused on your appearance and you don't like something about the way you appear to the world. And I found that quite interesting, because I was in Argentina a few years ago, and the thing that struck me was how beautifully dressed everyone in Argentina is. So when you look at the remedy, you think, actually, yeah, that does tie in with what's happening. And the other interesting one was in North America, where a few years before, I know if you go back about 10 years, the top selling remedy there was walnut, but it actually changed to Star of Bethlehem. And that's been at the same time as you've had all these problems, with the economy. So again, it ties in. Very interesting.
And how, I mean, it connects back totally what you were saying before. How do I feel today? So if we
it's how people are responding.
Yes, perfect. Absolutely perfect. So white chestnut is a great essence for today, as are all of the others that you mentioned, actually. Walnut would be a great one for change, and Star of Bethlehem, definitely. What essences would you suggest for dealing with today's stress, finding balance?
Well, again, I think it depends on the individual. So I wouldn't make a blanket recommendation. I wouldn't say, everyone go out and take this remedy or that remedy. I think what I'd say is focus on how you feel right now. I mean, there are sort of currents you can see in modern life. I mean, to give an example, we're in a world at the moment where it can be quite tough to find a job. It can be quite tough. You're worried, if you have a job, you're worried about losing your job. And in those circumstances, there are some remedies you might expect people to react in different ways. For example, if you were in a world where it was actually quite easy to leave your current job and find another one, you probably will be quite happy to stand up to a bully at work. In the current situation, there are probably some people who are kind of going along with pressures at work because they're worried about having to, the possibility they might lose their job. So you might think about remedies then like agrimony, which is a remedy for kind of wearing a mask pretending that everything's fine and kind of using a joke and lightheartedness, to kind of cover up how you really feel. Or you might think about a remedy like Centre, which is a remedy to help us define boundaries and actually say no to sometimes stronger personalities who try and force us down paths of their choosing. So they're the kind of remedies you might be thinking of. But again, it depends, really on the individual.
Of course.
It's all down to the individual.
Very often we see like the Vervain type, the workaholic type that tries to puts himself under pressure and keeps going.
Yeah.
Or the Oak type who also keeps going but doesn't ask for help.
No, and they, again, that's interesting examples, because they might be people who you would expect to see, in the sort of current circumstances. I mean, the oak person's interesting because that is one of those remedies that mirrors very closely the plant that it comes from. The oak tree is the tree in the British landscape which supports most other species, more species than any other tree. So so you can think of it as a tree with a strong sense of duty, very reliable. You can think of the strength of oak as a wood and the way the tree grows, very kind of solid in the countryside. All of those things are things that relate to the oak remedy and the oak emotion and the oak type. This is a person who is very strong, who doesn't tend to give in when things go wrong, who has a very strong sense of duty, and the reason they work hard is because other people rely on them, and they feel that they have to keep going, and they feel that they can keep going because, like the oak, they're very strong, so they don't really see limits to their own ability to keep on and on. So yeah, when you look at the economy and so on, you can see where that could come in.
Where it would be very useful, yes. Yeah. So there's so many of them, isn't there? And it's one of the first things people say, isn't it, when they first see a list? I want all of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's me.
Yeah. I think almost everyone does that. I mean, there's a lovely story a few years ago. We had someone come for a consultation at the centre who marched in with a leaflet, and he kind of slammed the leaflet down on the table, and he said, "Well, I can tell you now which ones I need. I need all of them except that one." And the one he pointed to was Vine, which is a remedy for people who know their own mind and are very directive and kind of tell other people what to do. So the one remedy that he actually needed was the one that he hadn't seen. He thought he needed all the others. But yeah, it's a common thing to think you need all 38. And again, it's one of those things where you can use this focus on today to start to narrow down the choice. Because when you actually examine it, you'll find that, okay, you probably have been in all those states at some time in your life. But the question is, where are you right now today?
Yeah. So listening to you talk here, I'm thinking that as I mentioned at the beginning, you're the author of the Bach Remedies workbook. This would be a very useful place for people to start, wouldn't it, if they want to find out and to be kind of have a process to help them work out how they feel.
Yeah, I mean, the workbook, I wrote the workbook with the idea that it was, I based it on BBC language courses. That was the kind of idea behind it, because if you do a BBC language course, you'll have a mix of activities. You won't just be reading remedy descriptions, you'll actually be actively using what you're learning. So that was the kind of idea behind it. And the idea of the workbook is that it will actually teach you the system. So it's not really a guide where you might have I mean, there are lots of books which are very good at, if you're not sure what to take and you want to start, then you just want to read through some indications and choose your mix. That's not really what the workbook does. The workbook is more for people who want to learn the remedies and learn the system really well. So it's a kind of slightly different approach. But yeah, there are so many very good introductions around now. Lots of authors have written on the books. I mean, at one time in Germany, I think there was a book being published every week, which is kind of shows you the level of interest. So yeah, there's loads of stuff. And these days, of course, you've got the internet as well. There's a lot of information on the internet. You don't even need to buy a book to get started.
And you've got some lovely videos as well as part of your own site, haven't you?
Yeah, we've started putting more videos up. I mean, it's something, when it stops raining outside, we'll do some more videos in the garden, because I think it's quite nice when you're talking about a remedy. It's quite nice to actually have the plant there and sort of show it while you're talking about it.
I think so, yes. It makes that connection, definitely,
yeah,
doesn't it? So I know that something that you're very passionate about, and the Bach Centre has expanded now into developing practitioner courses. Can we talk a little bit about, because Dr. Bach was very keen on self-help, and that's what
Yeah.
we've talked about, and of course that is the beauty of this, that we can help ourselves. But there are also now a growing number of practitioners.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's always been the case. There have always been people who use the remedies as part of their therapy service. So, if you're an aromatherapist, say, you might, give an aromatherapy session. At the end of it, if you've been talking to the client during that consultation, you probably come up with a few emotions, and you might suggest some batch remedies at the end.
Yeah.
So it's always been the
Yeah.
case that they'd be used by therapists. Our view on practitioners is that they are teachers. It is a self-help system, as you say. We're very anchored in the idea it's a self-help system. So what we have with our courses, we have 3 levels of training, 1, 2, and 3. 1 is, here are 38 remedies, and this is what they do. 2 is, this is how you make this personal to you. It's a bit more about the philosophy. It's also kind of a masterclass on remedy indications, telling similar remedies apart and that kind of thing. And then level 3 is about how to be a practitioner who encourages self-help. So it's about running consultations and about building into your consultation almost like a one-on-one seminar, so that when you have a client as a practitioner who's gone through our courses, the idea is that when you're seeing that client, you're actually teaching them how to use the system for themselves. I mean, we have a kind of a joke, but it's serious. We always say the best of our practitioners lose all their clients because they're very good at teaching self-help, and people don't need to keep coming back. So, but that's what Dr. Bach wanted. His dream was to have a set of remedies in every house, and to have every household empowered to actually heal its own members and the people in the community around them. So that was his dream, and that's where we try to focus what we do.
And you're doing a great job, aren't you? Because you have essences now in, do you know the number of countries?
It's always a bit vague. It's always a bit vague because I have to actually do a count. But I know. Remedies now. There are several companies making remedies. They're exported to it's at least 70 countries now. Wow. Around the world. Our own efforts on education, we have practitioners in more than 60 countries. We have approved courses in around 40 different countries, and we have training, level 3 training, practitioner training in around 30 of those. So it's pretty big. I mean, in terms of, we started in education in 1991, which was when we sold the remedy making company, because that gave us time and space to actually focus on education. And we started just doing a few courses here at the centre in a little training room. We had a little shed on the back, which is where people had their tea. So it was all very kind of cosy and homely. But we've now got those courses in all those different countries. They're not all run directly by us. We set standards for them. We approve them, and they're run by other organisations in different countries. All the trainers are on our register as practitioners, plus they've done additional training. Since we started, it's around 100,000 people who've actually gone through a Bach Centre approved course, in the world. So it's been quite a large effort, and it's something that we continue to grow every year.
That's brilliant, really brilliant. That because each person that trains is then able to help so many more.
That's exactly it. When you have someone, even if they've only done the level 1 course, it's a bit like planting a seed. You never know where that's going to develop. That one person might be the only person in their community who understands the system and how to use it, and they'll be using it, they'll be helping people with it, and there will be some of the people who they help who will then become interested, and then they will become practitioners in the future. So it is exactly like throwing seeds around the garden, and sometimes you're delighted by what comes up.
Yes, yeah, it's a lovely way to see it. Very, very beautiful. Now, I'd love to have you come back on to the Nature Connection show sometime in the near future to talk about the other book that you've written, which is Bach Flower Remedies for Men.
Sure.
Just tell us very quickly about that book and why you wrote it.
I wrote it really because I noticed on the courses here And I also saw in courses all around the place, wherever I looked, it was fairly obvious that most of the people actually sitting in the room were female. And when I talked to people who were involved in the kind of the more commercial side of making and selling remedies, it's also very clear that because they know that it's mostly women who buy remedies, most of the marketing they do is focused on women as well. So it seemed to me that men were being entirely ignored by everyone in this area. And as I was a man, I felt slightly indignant about that. So that's why I wrote the book. And it was an attempt really to kind of try to show men that, the fact that this is a system that uses flowers and the fact that it's focused on emotions does not make it a female-only system, because, men have emotions exactly the same as every other human being. And, forget the word flower if that's a problem. I know it might be a problem for some football supporters and guys down the pub. But in fact, the remedies are about being more yourself. They're about being who you really are. They're about self-empowerment, and those are things that I think should be available to everyone, regardless of sex, and that's why that was the interest for me in putting that book together.
Yeah, so I'd love to help you get that message out there. And
cool, I'd be delighted to come back.
Yeah, that would be great. So meantime, people can go and find that book on Amazon or wherever else that they're easy for them to find books wherever they live. So thank you so much, Stefan. Before we say goodbye, tell everybody how they can find out more about your centre.
Well, the best way is to go to our website, which is www.Bach Centre, so BACHCENTRE.com. And there we have links there. We have sites in 6 languages, so if English isn't your first language, you might find a language that you're more comfortable with. And what you'll find there is basic information on the system. So we have indications for all the remedies. You can download some of Dr. Bach's books. We have our definitive 12 healers, which we're very proud of, which we have about 16 translations of that, and it's the complete text from 1941 with footnotes and everything. It's rather pleased with that. You'll also find information about courses and about how to become a trainer and all kinds of stuff. It's all on there.
Wonderful. And so that's the place to start wherever you live in the world? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So wonderful. Is there anything that's happening this year that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, we have a couple of train the trainer courses this year. So we're going to be running a couple of those at Mount Vernon. But apart from that, no, it's our usual activities. We've got 16 courses running this year at the centre. There's just been the first Bach Centre approved level 3 in Singapore, happened just last week, and we have a level 3 in China, which I think is the second ever in China, which is taking place in about a week's time. So that's all keeping us busy. Yeah.
I actually think I saw those photos on good old Facebook.
Yes, you probably have. We've got a Facebook site, and so that's another place people can find us. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you very, very much. It's been really delightful making contact with you, and we'll speak again soon.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I want to remind you that your journey is a sacred one. You are not alone on this path of transformation. I, Sarah Estelle, and all of the Nature Kingdom are here with you, holding space for your growth and celebrating each step you take towards embracing your true essence. If you love today's content, leave us a review on your favorite podcast listening platform and share your biggest takeaway. And do visit the show notes of this episode, where you'll find extra resources to support you. Also, come and join our Rise Healer Rise community on Facebook and be part of a rising wave of healers who are empowered change makers. And make sure you subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until then, may you always remember, you are the healer the world has been waiting for. Rise, healer, rise.